Humanity never conquered the stars. They were shut out, excluded from the Galactic Accord, labeled too unstable, too emotional, too violent. So they went somewhere else. They built ships that disappeared from the known galaxy, crossed barriers no other species dared approach, entered a sector so distorted by redshift, light itself bent around it. What came back wasn't just human, it was evolved, it was angry. Now as the Accord faces a threat it cannot define, the humans return, not with diplomats, but with purpose, to show the galaxy what becomes of those they tried to forget. This is the story of the Redshift Return. They called it the departure, not a war, not a rebellion, not even an exile. It was a quiet, deliberate severing. The year was 3489 Galactic Standard when the last human ambassador walked out of the Accord chambers. The Accord's final ruling had been clear. Humanity was to be quarantined, restricted to their local stars, all travel beyond the Sol system forbidden. Their cultures were too unstable. Their technology, though impressive, was unpredictable. And worst of all, they refused to conform. So Earth answered with silence. For 3 years, not a single transmission escaped the Sol system. And then, they vanished. A fleet of 472 human vessels simultaneously activated a form of faster-than-light drive no Accord species had ever seen. It ripped open space in a direction that defied galactic mapping. A course angled at a region of deep redshift beyond the Sagittarius singularity. An area where time ran like syrup and radiation storms ate ships whole. No one followed. The Accord assumed they had committed a collective suicide. But some species whispered they went looking for something. Others feared they found it. 200 years later, a signal burst across Accord channels. Not in Accord protocol, not in trade language. It was human. A warning. To the architects of our exile, you feared our rage. You feared our pain. You never imagined what we'd become without you. Then came silence, and then came the first redshift ship. It appeared above the Accord world of Kitharon Prime, once a fortress planet, now a cultural hub. It shimmered into existence like a mirage, a vessel forged from obsidian and plasma, its edges unmeasurable, its drive silent. No scans worked, no messages penetrated. The ship hovered, watched, waited. Then it departed, but not before transmitting one image into every Accord system. A human face, scarred, hairless, eyes black as void. Beneath it, 3 words: we remember everything. The Accord High Council convened an emergency session inside the Ecliptic Spire, an orbital citadel above Genkafur, said to be invulnerable to kinetic assault. But no walls, however high or thick, could shield the Council from what they now faced. Humanity had returned, not with fleets, with silence, not with declarations, with memory. Chancellor Vrel Sin of the Feriac Collective hissed across the spire floor, tentacles quivering with tension. You said they were extinguished. Arch-Admiral Denth Sakor, a 6-eyed Akarak strategist and lifelong architect of the human quarantine edicts, looked like a creature facing extinction. They weren't supposed to survive the red space fold. Nothing survives it. They did, said Counselor Isari of the Dree. Her voice was quiet. And now they're watching. Meanwhile, in the heart of conquered-controlled space, the ripples were already being felt. Trade hubs froze. Border worlds experienced unexplained sensor anomalies. Smugglers and mercenaries, those old enough to remember the rumors, began to flee core systems. In the black market data streams, something terrifying emerged. An intercepted redshift broadcast. It contained no words, only images. Earth, broken, burned. The Concord's judgment, their fire. And then, what came after? Humanity didn't just survive in the redshift expanse. They thrived. In the gravity maelstroms where time fractured, they built cities of echolight. In the radiation belts where matter liquefied, they forged ships with memory-reactive armor. They turned adversity into art, pain into design, and now they were more than human, post-human, metasentient, quantum-bound. They called themselves the Vanished Kin. They had not returned for diplomacy. They had returned to remind the Accord that fire remembers its chains. One Redshift vessel, designation unknown, appeared above the Council's own citadel. Its drive did not hum, it sang. And as the Council's panic reached crescendo, a single transmission broke into every channel. We left as fractured tribes, we return as one will. You exiled us into hell. We learned to rule it. This is not war. This is balance. Then the ship vanished, and across the stars the countdown began. The ship was unlike anything seen in Accord history. It didn't blink into real space with the usual pulse of drive heat or hyperspatial distortion. It unfolded from itself, layers of matter curling outward from an origin point that defied mathematics. Witnesses described it as a tear in reality, held shut by willpower alone. It drifted above the moon of Rendax Prime, the hub of Concord Fleet Command. No weapons fired, no orders were given. Inside the ship, at the heart of a living interface of shifting carbon and light, sat the architect. He had no name anymore, no title, just a presence. He was the first human to survive the red space fold, the first to speak with time directly, the first to return, not as man, but as myth. His body was partly memory. His mind was encoded into the geometry of the ship's hull. Every movement he made rewrote data around him. The Concord feared him because they didn't understand what he had become. The humans of the past were angry. The architect was resolved. On the mining world of Kazakh 3, a riot bloomed. The miners, non-human species chained by Concord debt codes, overthrew their overseers. They weren't armed. They weren't trained. They were inspired. Someone had intercepted the architect's voice. He had said only, "Pain is permission. Now take it back." Within hours, 2 more sectors revolted. The spark of resistance had found oxygen. Meanwhile, a fractured Concord fleet attempted to blockade the Pelin Corridor, one of the few stable FTL lanes into Redshift space. It was destroyed, not by ships, by absence. A field of spatial silence swept through their formations. Engines died. Armor melted. Crews screamed without sound. From the black, a single phrase etched itself into their sensor logs. This corridor belongs to memory. Back in Concord High Command, panic mutated into paranoia. Systems went dark. Dissenters vanished. Council splintered. The Redshift threat was no longer theoretical. It was coming. It was organized. And it had a voice, the architects. The first battle did not begin with a volley of torpedoes or a scream of alarms. It began with a vibration in the fabric of space. The Concord's Second Armada, 50 warships strong, held formation above the Vel Meridian, a null zone bordering Redshift space. They believed they were prepared. They believed that centuries of numerical dominance and control over galactic infrastructure still meant something. They were wrong. At precisely 0100 hours Universal Time, the Redshift array came online. A lattice of semi-organic satellites orbiting invisible anchor points outside normal space began to sing. The frequency was not audible, it was emotional. Every pilot in the fleet felt it, first as unease, then dread, then a memory they couldn't identify but knew intimately. Loss. Then came the ships, hundreds of them. Not metallic, not traditional. They were formed from harmonics and momentum, cloaked in light that folded back on itself, pulsing with echoes of time displaced. The vanished kin had arrived. The architect appeared within the command bridge of the flagship Caldrian Vex, not physically, but as a projection of space itself. No breach, no transmission, just presence. He looked into the eyes of Admiral Karai Veltharn, a decorated war strategist with over 300 battle credits. She reached for her sidearm. He shook his head. This is not vengeance. This is correction. And then the array fired. It did not destroy, it reversed. Time recoiled around the fleet, ship systems unbooted, ammunition unfired, thoughts unfinished. Crews screamed as their memories disassembled backwards, caught in an unmaking. Only the Caldrian Vex was left intact, to tell the story, to carry the warning. Back in Redshift territory aboard the core vessel Remnant Star, the architect knelt within a chamber of crystalline mirrors. Each mirror showed a future. In some, the Concord burned. In others, humanity became worse. But one thread shimmered brightest: reconciliation through overwhelming understanding. He closed his eyes. Now they'll listen. Across the Accord, systems shut down not by force but by remembrance. Statues of Concord founders cracked. AI constructs began questioning orders. And in the blackest voids between stars, species long silent began to whisper again, "The redshift is truth." The Concord had no choice. Their fleets were fractured, communications corrupted. Worlds once loyal began to defect not with banners, but with silence. It wasn't a war anymore. It was a forgetting, a peeling back of power where nothing resisted, because belief itself had dissolved. At the edge of Accord space, in the last functioning stronghold of the old regime, Chancellor Vrelsen stood before a council of ghosts. Only 3 members remained. All others had fled, disappeared, or defected. "Do we surrender?" one whispered. "No," Vrelsen replied. "We remember what they were." Above them, Remnant Star arrived. The architect descended. Not in war form, not surrounded by the fleet, but alone. He walked into the chamber as if summoned by time itself, his body glowing faintly with redshift resonance, his eyes unreadable. "You feared what we were," he said, "and that was your first mistake." Vrelsen hissed. "You seek domination?" "No," the architect replied. "We seek resonance." He opened his palm, revealing a sphere, an echo crystal encoded with every historical truth, every memory the Accord had suppressed, every genocide hidden behind bureaucracy and cultural filters. He let it hover. "You erased us to protect your myth. Now you will live within ours." The Accord fell not in blood, but in truth. The sphere fractured across space, carried by redshift currents into every mind-compatible system. Species once blind saw. Species once complicit wept. Children were taught new histories. AI constructs reclassified humanity, not as anomaly, but as origin. And so the redshift became a culture, not one of humans, but of survivors. The architect walked one last corridor aboard the Remnant Star. He passed younger vanished kin, teaching non-humans the ways of folded space. He passed old rebels crafting music from echo code. He passed a mirror and did not stop. He reached the heart of the ship. A seat awaited. He sat, spoke. "To all corners of this galaxy, let it be known. We have returned not to conquer, but to remember. And in remembering, we become impossible to erase." The stars turned red, not from war, from truth.